The scream tore through the forest with such raw terror that Vincent Oakes dropped his axe mid-swing and bolted toward the sound without thinking. He had been cutting firewood near his isolated homestead when the cry pierced the afternoon quiet, followed immediately by the savage snarling of what could only be a pack of wild dogs. His boots pounded against the frost-hardened ground as he crashed through the underbrush, his heart hammering in his chest. He had heard stories about the feral dogs that roamed these frontier woods, abandoned by settlers who had fled deeper into human territory when the border conflicts escalated. The animals had grown mean and desperate, attacking anything that moved. When he burst into a small clearing, the scene before him froze his blood. A woman lay on her back near a fallen log, her leg caught in what looked like an old hunting trap someone had left behind. 3 mangy dogs circled her like wolves, their ribs showing through matted fur, their eyes wild with hunger. But it was the 4th dog that made Vincent's stomach drop. The largest of the pack had already sunk its teeth deep into the woman's calf, thrashing its head back and forth as blood darkened the earth beneath her. What made him hesitate for just a heartbeat was not the violence of the attack, but the realization that the woman was not human. Green skin, visible even beneath the dirt and blood, pointed ears pressed flat against her skull in pain and fear. Small tusks protruding from her lower jaw as she screamed again, trying desperately to fight off the beast with her bare hands, an orc woman. Here, alone in human territory. Every instinct told him to turn around and walk away. The war between their peoples had ended only 2 years ago, but the hatred still ran deep. His own brother had died in those final brutal battles. Most humans in these parts would sooner spit on an orc than help one. Some would actively harm them given the chance. But then her eyes found his across the clearing, green as summer grass and wide with agony and terror, and she did something that shattered every prejudice he had been raised with. She reached out toward him with one trembling hand, blood streaking her palm, and she begged. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Please stop the blood. I do not want to die here." Vincent moved before his mind could catch up with his body. He seized a thick branch from the ground and charged at the pack, roaring at the top of his lungs. The 3 circling dogs scattered immediately, their courage failing in the face of a larger threat. But the one with its jaws locked on her leg held on, shaking its head harder, trying to tear flesh from bone. Vincent swung the branch like a club, connecting with the dog's ribs with a sickening thud. The animal yelped and released its grip, stumbling sideways. He swung again, and this time the dog turned and fled, limping after its packmates into the shadows of the forest. Vincent dropped to his knees beside the woman, his hands hovering over her mangled leg. The bite was deep, possibly to the bone, and blood pulsed out in steady spurts that told him an artery had been compromised. She would bleed out in minutes if he did not act immediately. "The trap," she panted, her face going gray. "Cannot move, cannot run." He looked down and saw the rusted iron jaws clamped around her ankle, just below where the dog had bitten. Someone's forgotten snare, now claiming a victim seasons after it had been set. Vincent pulled his belt free with shaking hands and wrapped it around her thigh, just above the worst of the bleeding, cinching it as tight as he could. She cried out at the pressure but did not fight him. "I need to get you out of here," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady even as his mind raced. "Those dogs might come back with more of their pack. Can you stay conscious?" "I will try," she whispered, but her eyes were already starting to flutter. Vincent examined the trap, cursing under his breath. It was an old bear trap, the kind that took 2 strong men to pry open under normal circumstances. He positioned his feet on either side of the mechanism and gripped the jaws with both hands, throwing all his weight into forcing them apart. His muscles screamed in protest, tendons standing out like cords in his neck, but the rusted iron groaned and began to give way. The moment there was enough space, the orc woman pulled her ankle free, whimpering at the fresh wave of pain. He did not give her time to rest. Vincent scooped her up in his arms, shocked at how solid she felt despite her injury. She was all lean muscle and dense bone, heavier than any human woman he had ever carried, but desperation gave him strength. She wrapped one arm around his neck, her blood soaking through his shirt, her breathing coming in short gasps against his shoulder. "Stay with me," he commanded as he began the trek back toward his homestead. "Keep talking. Tell me your name." "Mara," she managed. "Mara Krell." "I am Vincent." "Vincent Oakes. You are going to be fine, Mara. Just hold on." He had no idea if he was lying or telling the truth. The walk back to his cabin felt like it took hours, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. Every step jostled her injured leg, making her bite back cries of pain. By the time he kicked open his door and carried her inside, she had gone limp in his arms, her head lolling against his chest. Vincent laid her on his kitchen table, the only surface large enough and sturdy enough to work on, and began pulling down every medical supply he owned from the shelf above the hearth. His hands moved on instinct, knowledge from his years as a field medic during the war taking over. He cut away the leather of her boot and the fabric of her trousers, exposing the full extent of the damage. The dog bite had shredded muscle and torn open veins. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, stitched the artery as best he could with shaking hands, and packed the deepest parts with clean cloth before bandaging the entire mess. The trap injury was less severe but still concerning, deep bruising and lacerations that would take weeks to heal properly. Through it all, Mara drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally crying out in her own language, words he did not understand but that sounded like prayers or curses. When he finally finished and covered her with a blanket, the sun had already set outside his window. Vincent collapsed into a chair beside the table, his shirt stiff with her blood, his entire body trembling with exhaustion and delayed shock. What had he just done? He had saved an orc. If anyone found out, if any of his neighbors discovered what lay on his kitchen table right now, they would burn his house down with both of them inside. The frontier communities had long memories and short tempers when it came to orcs. He should wake her up, tell her to leave, pretend this never happened. But when he looked at her face, relaxed in unconsciousness, he saw only a person who had been terrified and in pain, a person who had begged him for help. How could he turn away from that? Mara woke 3 hours later, her eyes snapping open with the wariness of someone accustomed to danger. She tried to sit up immediately, gasping when pain lanced through her leg. Vincent stood from where he had been dozing in the chair and gently pressed her shoulder back down. "Do not move," he said quietly. "You will tear the stitches. You are safe here." Her eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the rough timber walls, the simple furnishings, the fire crackling in the hearth. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "I am an orc. You are human." "Your kind does not help mine." Vincent poured water from a pitcher into a cup and held it to her lips. She drank greedily, some of the color returning to her cheeks. "Your kind does not have a monopoly on suffering," he said. "I saw someone who needed help. That is all." "That is never all," Mara countered, but there was no accusation in her tone, only confusion and wary gratitude. "What do you want from me? Right now, I want you to rest and heal. In the morning, I want you to tell me what you were doing out there alone, stepping into traps and getting attacked by wild dogs." He pulled the chair closer to the table and sat down, studying her face. Up close, He could see the small scars that marked her jaw and cheekbone, the kind that came from a hard life. "But mostly, I want to make sure you do not die on my kitchen table after I spent 3 hours stitching you back together." Something in his tone made her lips twitch, almost a smile. "You have medical training." "I was a field medic during the war." He saw her stiffen at that and added quickly, "I stitched up just as many orc prisoners as I did human soldiers. A body is a body when it is bleeding out." Mara studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for deception or hidden malice. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she finally relaxed back against the table. "I was hunting," she said quietly. "I left my clan 3 months ago. They did not approve of my refusal to take a mate I did not want. Out here, I can live on my own terms, but food is scarce with winter coming. I was tracking a deer when I stepped wrong and caught the trap. The dogs found me before I could free myself." "You have been living alone in these woods for 3 months." Vincent could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "That is suicide, even for someone used to frontier life." "Better than being mated to a male who sees me as property," Mara said flatly. "Better than a clan that values obedience over choice." He understood that kind of desperation, the willingness to risk death rather than accept a life you could not bear. Vincent stood and moved to the fire, ladling stew from the pot that hung over the flames. He had made it that morning, never imagining he would be sharing it with an orc woman by nightfall. "You cannot go back out there, not with your leg like that. It will be weeks before you can walk properly, maybe longer before you can hunt." Mara tried to push herself up on her elbows, her jaw set with stubborn pride. "I will not impose on you, I will manage." "You will die," Vincent said bluntly, carrying the bowl of stew to her. "Infection will set in, or the dogs will find you again, or you will simply starve. I am not throwing you out to die after spending half a day saving your life. That would be idiotic. Your neighbors will not see it that way." "My neighbors do not come out here. I keep to myself for a reason." He helped her sit up enough to eat, supporting her back with one arm while she held the bowl. The intimacy of the gesture was not lost on either of them, but necessity overrode awkwardness. "You can stay until you are healed. After that, you can make your own choices." Mara ate slowly, her hands shaking slightly from blood loss and shock. When she finished, she looked at him with something close to wonder. "I do not understand you, Vincent Oakes." "That makes 2 of us," he admitted, taking the empty bowl from her hands. "But here we are." The first week was the hardest. Mara's leg became infected despite Vincent's best efforts, and she burned with fever for 3 days straight. He sat beside her through the worst of it, changing the bandages, forcing water and willow bark tea down her throat, bathing her face and neck with cool cloths when the fever peaked. She thrashed and muttered in her delirium, sometimes in her own language, sometimes in the common tongue, fragments of sentences that spoke of battles and betrayals and a loneliness that made his chest ache. When the fever finally broke on the 4th morning, she woke to find Vincent slumped asleep in the chair beside her, dark circles under his eyes, his hand still resting on her arm as if checking for warmth. Mara stared at him for a long time, this human man who had turned his entire life upside down to save hers, and felt something shift deep in her chest. As she healed, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Vincent would wake early to tend his small herd of goats and chickens, check his trap lines, and split firewood for the coming winter. Mara, confined to the bed he had given up for her while he slept on the floor by the fire, would watch him work through the window and feel increasingly useless. But as her strength returned, she began to find ways to contribute. She could not walk, but she could use her hands. She mended his clothes, which were in desperate need of repair. She sorted and cleaned the herbs he had gathered for winter medicines, her knowledge of plants surprising him. She carved new handles for his tools when the old ones cracked, her skill with a knife evident in the smooth, functional results. "You are good at this," Vincent said one evening, examining a newly carved ladle she had made from a piece of oak. The wood was smooth as glass, the proportions perfect. "My mother was a woodcarver," Mara said, not looking up from the spoon she was working on. "She taught me before she died. Said a woman should always have a skill that is hers alone, something no male can take from her. She sounds wise. She was. My father never appreciated it." Mara's hands stilled on the wood. He wanted her to be soft and quiet. She was neither. "I am neither." Vincent set the ladle aside and moved to sit on the floor near where she lay propped up on pillows. The cabin was small enough that they were always close, but he tried to give her space when he could. "Is that why your clan wanted you to take a mate you did not want, to make you more manageable, something like that?" She finally looked at him, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "What about you? Why do you live out here alone? A human male with your skills could have a wife, a farm closer to town, a real life." "I had a wife," Vincent said quietly. "She died of fever 4 years ago. We had only been married a year. After that, I could not stand to be around people. Everyone pitied me, or they tried to push me toward courting again, as if Anna could just be replaced like a broken plow. So I came out here where no one could tell me how to grieve." Mara reached out and touched his hand, her fingers rough with calluses but gentle. "I am sorry. That is a pain I cannot imagine." "I am sorry about your mother," he said, turning his hand over to squeeze hers briefly before letting go. The contact felt dangerous, a line they should not cross, but neither of them seemed capable of maintaining proper distance anymore. By the end of the second week, Mara could stand with help and hobble a few steps, using a crutch Vincent had fashioned for her. By the third week, she was moving around the cabin on her own, still limping badly but determined to be useful. She took over the cooking, which was a relief to Vincent, whose skills in that area were basic at best. She had a gift for making even simple ingredients taste rich and complex, herbs and techniques he had never encountered. "This is amazing," he said one night, savoring a stew she had made with venison from his last hunt. "What is in this? If I tell you, it will not be special anymore," Mara said, but there was a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Real smiles came more easily to her now, and Vincent found himself doing ridiculous things just to see them. She had the most beautiful smile, tusks and all, warm and genuine in a way that lit up her entire face. They talked more as the days passed, sharing stories of their lives before this strange intersection. Vincent told her about growing up on a farm, about his decision to train as a medic instead of a soldier, about the horrors he had witnessed during the war that had nothing to do with enemy lines, and everything to do with what people were willing to do to each other. Mara spoke of her childhood in the clan, of the pressure to conform to expectations she could never meet, of her mother's quiet rebellion that had inspired her own. "Do you miss them?" Vincent asked one night as they sat by the fire, Mara in the chair now that she could sit comfortably, Vincent on the floor with his back against the hearth. "Your clan." "I miss my younger brother," Mara admitted. "He was the only one who supported my leaving, but the rest," she shook her head. "No, I miss the idea of belonging somewhere, but I do not miss the reality of it. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Vincent stared into the flames. "I feel the same about the human settlements. I am supposed to feel safer around my own kind, but I never felt more alone than when I was surrounded by people who could not understand me." "And now," Mara asked softly, "do you still feel alone?" He looked up at her, at the way the firelight caught in her eyes and turned them into pools of liquid gold green. "No," he said honestly, "I do not." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Mara looked away first, her cheeks darkening with a flush he could see even through her green skin. "Vincent, I—" A sharp knock at the door shattered the intimacy like a rock through glass. They both froze, eyes wide. Vincent never had visitors. No one came this far into the woods without good reason. "Stay here," he whispered, rising to his feet. "Do not make a sound." Mara nodded and quickly moved away from the window, pressing herself against the wall where she could not be seen from outside. Vincent took a deep breath and opened the door a crack, keeping his body blocking the interior of the cabin. A man stood on his porch, older than Vincent by a decade, with a thick beard and hard eyes. Vincent recognized him as Thomas Vale, a trapper who worked the woods a few miles south. They had exchanged maybe 10 words in the 2 years Vincent had lived here. "Thomas," Vincent said, keeping his voice neutral, "what brings you out this way?" "Heard the dogs have been causing trouble," Thomas said, trying to peer past Vincent into the cabin. "Lost some chickens myself. Thought I would check if you had seen any sign of them." "I ran off a pack about 3 weeks back," Vincent said, not moving from the doorway. "Have not seen them since." Thomas nodded slowly, but his eyes were calculating. "That is good. Also wanted to warn you. There has been an orc spotted in the area. Female, traveling alone. If she is desperate enough, she might try to rob homesteads. Keep your gun loaded." Vincent's blood ran cold, but he forced himself to nod casually. "I appreciate the warning. I will keep an eye out." "You do that." Thomas finally looked directly at Vincent instead of trying to see past him. "You know what orcs are like. Cannot trust them. She is probably the scout for a raiding party. Might want to consider moving closer to town until they clear the area." "I can handle myself," Vincent said flatly. "But thank you for the concern." Thomas lingered a moment longer, clearly wanting to say more or perhaps push past Vincent to look inside, but Vincent held his ground. Finally, the older man shrugged and turned to leave. "Suit yourself. Just do not say I did not warn you when you wake up with a knife at your throat." Vincent watched until Thomas disappeared into the tree line, then shut the door and locked it, his heart pounding. When he turned around, Mara stood in the center of the room, her face ashen. "They are looking for me," she said. "If they find me here, they will kill us both." "They will not find you," Vincent said firmly, crossing to her. "You are not going anywhere until you are fully healed. Vincent, you do not understand what you are risking." Mara grabbed his arm, her grip strong despite her injury. "Harboring an orc, especially out here where there are no laws to protect you, is as good as signing your own death warrant. If Thomas suspects anything, if anyone sees me, they will burn this place to the ground. Then we will be careful." He covered her hand with his. "Mara, I am not throwing you out. I will not do it." "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? What am I to you that you would risk everything?" Vincent looked at her, really looked at her, and finally admitted the truth he had been avoiding for weeks. "You are everything," he said quietly. "You are the first person in 4 years who has made me feel alive. The first person who sees me as I am and does not try to change me. I do not care if you are an orc. I do not care if the whole world says this is wrong. I care about you, Mara, more than I should, more than is safe." Tears spilled down her cheeks and she let out a shaky breath. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to. I have been telling myself it is just gratitude, that once I am healed I will leave and forget you. But I cannot forget you. I do not want to." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm beneath his palms, her tears wet against his thumbs. "Then stay," he said. Not just until you are healed. Stay with me. We will figure out how to make this work. Vincent, people like us do not get happy endings. Maybe not, he agreed, but we get to try. Is that not worth something? Mara closed the distance between them, pressing her forehead against his. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, the weight of their decision settling over them. When she finally kissed him, it was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Vincent kissed her back, tasting salt from her tears and something uniquely her, something he knew he would crave for the rest of his life. They pulled apart slowly, both of them shaking slightly. "We will need to be smart about this," Vincent said, his mind already working through the logistics. "You cannot be seen. We will need to set up signals, ways to alert each other if someone is coming, and we need a backup plan if things go wrong. I should practice moving quietly with my legs still healing," Mara added, falling into the same practical mindset. "And we need a hiding place. Somewhere in the cabin I can go if someone shows up unexpectedly." They spent the next hour working out details, planning for contingencies, turning their relationship into something that could survive in a world hostile to its existence. It was not romantic, but it was necessary, and there was a kind of intimacy in the planning itself, in the way they worked together to protect what they were building. Over the next month, winter settled over the frontier in earnest. Snow came early and heavy, blanketing the forest in white and making travel difficult. It was a blessing in disguise. With the roads impassable and the days short, visitors became even more unlikely. Vincent and Mara fell into a domestic rhythm that felt both natural and miraculous. Mara's leg continued to heal, though she would always have a slight limp and scars that mapped the shape of a wild dog's teeth. She did not seem to mind. "Scars tell stories," she said when Vincent expressed concern about the lasting damage. "This one tells the story of the day my life changed." I would not trade it. They worked side by side during the days. Mara proved to be an excellent hunter once she could move properly again, her orcish strength and endurance making her better at tracking game through deep snow than Vincent had ever been. He focused on maintaining the cabin and tending the animals, expanding the shelter for the goats so they would stay warm through the worst of the cold. At night, they would sit by the fire and talk, or sometimes just exist in comfortable silence. Vincent taught Mara to read, something her clan had never bothered with. She absorbed the skill hungrily, sounding out words in his few books with the determination she brought to everything. He learned words in her language in return, the harsh, beautiful syllables that spoke of stone and battle and honor. They kissed often now, though they took things slowly, both aware that they were building something that needed a strong foundation. There was too much at stake to rush. But the affection between them grew with each passing day, expressed in small touches, in the way Mara would lean against Vincent's shoulder when she was tired, in the way he would tuck a strand of her dark hair behind her pointed ear when it fell in her face. 2 months after Mara had first stumbled into that trap, Vincent woke to find the bed beside him empty. They had been sharing it for weeks now, the cold making separate sleeping arrangements impractical, and both of them long past pretending they wanted distance. He sat up, alarmed, and found her standing at the window in her nightshirt, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. "Mara, are you all right?" She turned to him, and he saw that her face was troubled. "My brother is out there," she said quietly. "I saw him from the window. He is alone, and he looks like he has been traveling for days." Vincent was out of bed immediately, pulling on his trousers and boots. "How do you know it is him?" "I would know Roth anywhere." Mara was already dressing, her movements quick despite the early hour. "He would not come unless something was terribly wrong. He knows I left to be alone." They opened the door together, and Vincent saw the figure trudging through the snow toward the cabin. He was massive, even for an orc, easily 7 feet tall with shoulders like a bull. But there was no threat in his posture, only exhaustion. When he was close enough to see Mara clearly, his face broke into an expression of relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Mara," he called out in the orcish language, his voice hoarse. "Thank the stones. I thought I would never find you." Mara responded in the same language, a rapid exchange that Vincent could not follow. Whatever she said made her brother's eyes widen, and he looked at Vincent with something between suspicion and curiosity. But he did not reach for the weapon at his belt, which Vincent took as a good sign. "He does not speak our tongue well," Mara said, switching back to common for Vincent's benefit. "Roth, this is Vincent Oakes. He saved my life. Vincent, this is my brother, Roth Krell." "You are the human she lives with now," Roth said in heavily accented common, each word carefully chosen. "The one who heals." "I am," Vincent said, keeping his voice steady despite the intimidating figure before him. "Your sister is welcome here for as long as she wishes to stay. You are as well if you need shelter." Roth studied him for a long moment, and Vincent had the distinct feeling he was being evaluated by someone who could break him in half without much effort. Then, slowly, the massive orc nodded. "I need shelter for one night, then I must go back." "But I had to warn her, had to see that she was alive." They brought him inside, and Mara set about making food while Roth thawed by the fire. Vincent noted the way the orc's eyes tracked every detail of the cabin, taking in the two-place settings, the single bed, the obvious signs that 2 people lived here together. But he said nothing, waiting until Mara pressed a bowl of hot stew into his hands. "The clan is planning to move deeper into the mountains," Roth said between bites, his exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "The humans are pushing again, burning orc settlements along the border. Father says we must leave before spring or we will be slaughtered. He sent hunting parties to find you, Mara. He wants you to come back, says he will let you choose your own mate if you return." Mara's hand found Vincent's under the table, gripping tightly. "And if I refuse, then you will be declared dead to the clan. No orc will acknowledge you. You will be alone forever." Roth's voice was heavy with sorrow. "I do not want this for you, sister, but I also see that you have found something here." His eyes moved to Vincent. "A human who looks at you the way mates should look at each other. A home, perhaps even happiness." "I have found all of that," Mara said quietly. "I will not give it up, not even for the clan, not even for Father's approval." Roth nodded slowly as if he had expected this answer. "Then I will tell them I could not find you, that you must have died in the woods. It will be easier for everyone that way." "You would lie to the clan for me," Mara's voice broke. "You are my sister. You deserve to be happy, even if that happiness is not what our people would choose for you." Roth reached across the table and took her free hand. "But you must be careful. The humans are dangerous now. They see all orcs as enemies. If they find you with him, they will not care that he is protecting you. They will see only an orc and a traitor." "We have been careful," Vincent said, "and we will continue to be. I will not let anything happen to her." Roth turned his full attention to Vincent, and there was something ancient and weighing in his gaze. "You love her, I can see it, but love is not always enough. Are you prepared to fight for her, to die for her if necessary?" "Yes," Vincent said without hesitation. "I am. Good." Roth released Mara's hand and returned to his stew. "Then perhaps you both have a chance." He stayed that night, sleeping on the floor by the fire despite Mara's protests that he take the bed. In the morning, he embraced his sister for a long moment, speaking to her in their language, words that made her cry and nod and hold him tighter. Then he clasped Vincent's arm in the warrior's grip, a gesture of respect that Vincent returned as firmly as he could manage. "Protect her," Roth said simply, "or I will come back and tear you apart." "Understood," Vincent replied and meant it. They watched Roth disappear into the forest, his massive form swallowed by the trees and snow. Mara leaned against Vincent's side and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am saying goodbye to everything I used to be," she said. "It hurts, but it also feels right. I chose you, Vincent. I chose this life. I do not regret it. Neither do I." They went back inside, shutting the door against the cold, and Vincent built up the fire while Mara made tea. The cabin felt smaller somehow with just the two of them again, more intimate, as if Roth's presence and subsequent departure had somehow made their relationship more real, more permanent. "What happens when spring comes?" Mara asked as they sat together, her head on his shoulder. "When travel becomes easier and more humans venture into these woods, we will deal with it," Vincent said. "Maybe we will need to move deeper into the wilderness, find a place even more remote. Or maybe we will find others like us, humans and orcs who have chosen each other despite what the world says. We cannot be the only ones." "You really believe that there are others?" "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what we are doing is madness." Mara laughed, the sound soft and sad and full of affection. "It is madness anyway, but it is our madness." Spring did come, as it always does, bringing with it the thaw and the dangers they had anticipated. Twice, hunters passed close enough to the cabin that Mara had to hide in the root cellar they had dug beneath the floorboards, staying silent and still, while Vincent deflected questions about whether he had seen any orcs in the area. Both times, the hunters left without incident, but the encounters left them shaken and reminded them how precarious their situation remained. In late spring, Thomas Vale returned, this time with two other men. Vincent saw them coming from a distance and had time to warn Mara, who disappeared into her hiding place with practiced ease. He met the men outside, his rifle casually slung over his shoulder, his posture relaxed despite the tension coiling in his gut. "Thomas," he greeted. "What brings you out this way with company?" "We have been tracking that orc woman," Thomas said, his eyes hard and suspicious. "Found her camp about 10 miles from here. She ran before we could catch her, but we think she is heading this direction. You have not seen anything?" "Not a thing," Vincent lied smoothly. "But I will keep watch. If I see her, I will fire 3 shots. You will hear it from wherever you are." One of the other men, a younger man with a cruel mouth, looked at the cabin with interest. "Mind if we look around, just to be sure she is not hiding nearby?" Every instinct screamed at Vincent to refuse, but he knew that would only make them more suspicious. "Go ahead," he said with a shrug, "but be quick about it. I have work to do." The 3 men searched the property, looking in the small barn, checking behind the cabin, even venturing into the tree line. Vincent stood perfectly still, fighting the urge to watch them, to make sure they did not accidentally discover the root cellar. But his luck held. After 20 minutes they regrouped, looking frustrated. "Nothing here," the younger man admitted. "Sorry for the trouble, Oakes." "No trouble," Vincent said. "Good luck with your hunt." He watched them leave, waiting until they were well out of sight before going back inside and opening the hidden door. Mara climbed out, her face pale, her hands shaking. "That was too close," she said. "Vincent, we cannot keep doing this. Sooner or later they will find me. And when they do, they will kill you for helping me." "Then we leave," Vincent said. "We pack up what we can carry and head north. I have heard there are places beyond the mountains where the war never reached, where humans and orcs live in peace. It might be nothing but rumor, but it is better than waiting here to be discovered. You would give up your home for me." "This is not my home," Vincent said, pulling her into his arms. You are. Wherever we go, as long as we are together, that is home." They left 3 days later, taking only what they could carry on their backs and leading the goats on ropes behind them. Vincent felt a pang as he locked the cabin door for the last time, but it was overwhelmed by the sense of possibility that came with motion, with choosing their own path rather than waiting for disaster to find them. The journey north was hard. They avoided settlements and traveled mostly at night, sleeping during the day in whatever shelter they could find. Twice they had to hide from human patrols. Once they encountered a group of orc warriors who seemed ready to attack, until Mara spoke to them in their language, explaining their situation. The warriors let them pass, though their leader warned that they were fools to think they could find acceptance anywhere. But the further north they traveled, the more the landscape changed. The forests grew thicker, the mountains taller, and the signs of civilization became scarcer. They began to encounter other refugees, both human and orc, people fleeing the conflicts in the south. Some were hostile. Others were simply wary. But a few were kind, sharing food or shelter or information about safe routes. It was from one such group, a mixed family of humans and orcs who had built a homestead in a hidden valley, that they learned about the settlement they sought. It was called Haven, and it lay in a box canyon 3 weeks further north, protected by mountains on all sides and accessible only through a narrow pass. The people there had made a conscious choice to leave the war behind, to build something new based on cooperation rather than conflict. "Is it real?" Mara asked the family's matriarch, a human woman married to an orc man, their 3 half-blood children playing nearby. "Or just a story people tell themselves to keep hope alive?" "It is real," the woman said with a smile. "We lived there for 5 years before deciding we wanted more land. It is not perfect. People still have prejudices, still struggle with the old hatreds, but they are trying, and that makes all the difference." Vincent and Mara reached Haven on a warm summer evening, 7 months after they had fled Vincent's cabin. They stood at the entrance to the pass, looking down at the settlement spread out below, and Vincent felt Mara's hand slip into his. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I am terrified," she admitted. "What if they reject us? What if there is no place for us even here?" "Then we will make a place," Vincent said. "We have come this far, we can go further if we have to." But they did not have to go further. The people of Haven welcomed them with open arms, taking in 2 more refugees without question or judgment. They were given a small cabin on the edge of the settlement, rough but sturdy, and work that suited their skills. Vincent became the community's medic, his experience during the war finally put to use in saving lives rather than simply prolonging suffering. Mara became a hunter and woodcarver, her skills valued and respected. More importantly, they were allowed to simply be together. No one cared that Vincent was human and Mara was an orc. Half the couples in Haven were mixed, and the children who played in the streets were every shade of green and pink and brown imaginable. It was not the world Vincent had grown up in, nor the world Mara had left behind. It was something entirely new, fragile and imperfect but full of hope. 6 months after arriving in Haven, on the first anniversary of the day Vincent had pulled Mara from that trap, he asked her to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, and the question came out as naturally as breathing. "Marry me," he said. "Not because we have to hide anymore, but because I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours. I want to build a life with you, Mara, a real life, children if you want them, a future that is ours to shape." Mara turned to him, her green eyes shining with tears, and she laughed. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you ridiculous human, I will marry you." They were wed a month later in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions, officiated by Haven's founder, a half-orc woman named Helena who had built the settlement from nothing. Vincent's hands shook as he placed the carved wooden ring on Mara's finger, a ring she had made for herself because she wanted to wear something of her own creation. Mara did not shake at all when she placed a braided leather band on his, her voice strong and clear as she spoke the vows they had written together. The celebration lasted long into the night, with food and music and dancing that brought together two cultures in a joyful chaos. Vincent danced with his wife, spinning her around the fire, and he thought about the path that had brought them here. The wild dogs, the blood, the terror in her eyes when she had reached for him and begged for help. The choice he had made in that moment to see a person instead of an enemy. Everything that had followed, all the fear and danger and impossible hope, had led to this. "What are you thinking?" Mara asked, her arms around his neck, her body warm against his. "I am thinking that I would do it all again," Vincent said. "Every terrifying moment, every risk. Just to end up here with you." "You are sentimental when you are happy," she teased, but her smile was soft and full of love. "Only for you." They stayed at the celebration until the fire burned low and the other couples began to drift away to their own homes. Then Vincent took Mara's hand and led her back to their cabin, to the life they had fought so hard to build. Behind them, Haven slept peacefully under the stars, a small beacon of what the world could become if people chose to see each other's humanity instead of their differences. And in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, Vincent and Mara knew they had found something that transcended the boundaries of species or culture. They had found home. They had found love. They had found a future worth fighting for. The scars on Mara's leg would always remind them of how it had started, of the day a wild dog had sank its teeth into her flesh, and she had clung to a stranger, begging him to stop the blood. But those scars also represented something else now. The mark of the moment when everything had changed, when two people from different worlds had chosen each other despite impossible odds. They had been given a chance, and they had taken it with both hands, and they would never let go.